Are there other questions for Marina, John, Carlo, Marco? This one from Stuart.
Yeah, I have a question about target of opportunity programs where obviously we can't specify our target or even the full content of an OB at this time, but for the August 12th deadline, we're still expected to provide some kind of skeleton or template at least of how we plan to use the time. Is that still the case?
I don't know, I can take it, but of course, please compliment. Yes, the idea is to have the OBs that are the template OBs with basic strategy, with acquisition and the planned use of the setting of the instrument and maybe even example exposure times prepared and verified and checked, such that when you get the actual target of opportunity, there is no need for iterations, finding out information. Oh, how was this done? Which actual acquisition should I use? What does this parameter mean? And these times can be very stressful, and we want to avoid that the user misses the information. So essentially, the OBs that are prepared will need to be, at the time of the triggering, will need to be duplicated and the targets added, typically very little modified, such that you get actually viable observation prepared and ready to go within seconds, as opposed to trying to start digging through the user manuals and finding out the ways to use the tools.
Okay. And then also, once I do trigger an observation like that, and admittedly these are not rapid mode targets, they're relatively slow ones, but do I then need to actually do a change request for a target, given that the target was not specified in the phase one?
No, you don't need to run the target change request, because for target of opportunity, we know from your proposal that you didn't know which targets, but we know which target type. And when you submit the OBs, you're submitting the OBs for execution to Paranal, and Paranal staff will receive this target of opportunity OBs and will essentially they will approve that this can go forward. They will check that you have asked to observe supernova and that your target is actually a supernova and it's not a gravitational wave that is clashing with another program, for example.
Okay, what if the program type is not target opportunity though? I mean, perhaps I should have clarified. The example I've given is fast radio burst host galaxies, and so these are not things that we need to get to in a hurry, and so therefore they don't actually qualify as target of opportunity programs because we don't need the observations within a week. But I don't know what the coordinates are at the time of submission. But once I put those into the program and submit them, sometimes I've had a support astronomer say, yep, that's all good to go, and other times a different support astronomer or a different instrument has said, well, no, you haven't specified this, you haven't submitted a request to observe this particular target, because they don't view that as in a target of opportunity mode. So
sure.
Is there some process I should follow to make this streamlined or simplified, or?
Sure. Well, as you can imagine, we have a large variety of the programs. In principle, all the programs should come in with the targets, and we need to check the targets do not clash with other approved programs, because it may lead to unnecessary waste of duplication of the use of the exposure time of the telescope. Occasionally, it does actually even happen that two programs get approved that ask for same targets, but it's extremely rare, and there are some checks that are done to avoid that beforehand. Now, if your program comes in with unknown coordinates, if there is time to actually go through this check of because this is not a target of opportunity program where you need to trigger within a week, or there is at least 5, 6, 7 days, there is time for this iteration. It's better to check to avoid clashes and to avoid complaints later if in case there are other programs that are going for the same targets. And we typically try to resolve such cases also to make sure that the teams agree or that there is no scooping of somebody who is actually already observing this and somebody else goes for it.
Okay, well, I can pretty much guarantee there won't be clashes without particular targets, but I think I'll follow that process from here on. Thanks.
Thank you.
Are there other questions?
So can I ask a question to Monica, because this is something that I realized today looking at my specific phase one. So I see that ops prep is also showing not only this possibility of choosing the this background image, but there is also this button that allows one to choose from a much larger database. Can you maybe comment on that?
So yeah, in principle, I mean, yes, thanks for making that comment because I forgot to mention it. Yes, you can also choose from this list of archive images. I mean, which is a standard list that Aladdin provides, right? I mean, as some of you may have noticed, I mean, we base our Sky view on the Aladdin Lite interface, and so. In fact, yeah, in principle, I mean, you can also choose from that list. And and John needs to confirm or not. I mean, if then that image from that database is used as a background image, is that also the case, John?
Yeah, no.
No.
Not yet. Ultimately, it should be because all of those images are available. Most of them are available, so they can be obtained from one source or another. Obviously, Aladdin Lite manages to get them, so we should be able to get them. But it hasn't been implemented yet. So indeed, when you select any image other than the default, in P2FC, it will then generate the default two images, finding charts based on the default background, plus an additional finding chart based on whatever background image you have selected. In the case that you select one of those, so that works for everything in the other selection mode. So it works for the default image, the Gaia image, if you've uploaded your own image, or if you take an image from the ESO Science Archive facility. Finding charts will work for all of those options. But if you take an image from the other option, from this one, I suspect that in almost all, if not all cases, it will probably crash, which is a bit embarrassing. My intention was to add support for all of those. And in the meantime, it should at least simply just produce the two default ones and maybe present a warning, could not make a finding chart for the selected custom image or something like that. I'll look into that into the next days. It'll be implemented in a future version.
Thank you. There
is a question in the chat. Yes, to John, if there is a limit on the dimension of external image that could be uploaded in the finding charts.
Trying to remember, not really. There is a file size limit, which I can check. Just give me a moment to check on. But there's not a specific limit on the dimension size. It can handle VerCam images and OmegaCam images, so it's quite robust like that. There is an issue that the bigger the image that you want to upload, the longer that takes, and it will also affect how long it takes to produce the finding chart. And that has an effect. The finding chart generation, when you launch it and it starts the finding chart generation, if it takes longer than 5 minutes, the web browser will come back and say, oh, I had no response for 5 minutes. There must be an error. There's a problem somewhere. In fact, the finding chart generation will continue on the server, and eventually, provided it all goes successfully, the finding chart will be added to the OB. If I can just find the right window, yes, this one, I can tell you the size, the maximum size. This one. If I read it correctly, the maximum image size is 10 gigabytes. So images in size up to 10 gigabytes can be handled. It may even handle compressed images, but I can't be sure. So does that answer the question? Okay, great.
Are there other questions? I don't see
I
other
would like to
questions.
invite
Oh,
people,
yeah.
I mean, in case you do start using API, because this is something that we have introduced a few years ago, and it takes a while to get to adopt it, etc. I mean, we are actually very interested to hear your feedback and what you might want to have in order to if we need to develop something. I mean, we cannot guarantee, of course, that we will develop it, but we can try to see where it can come. And the more requests we get, the more chances we have to provide better service. So if you have scripts that edit OBs or create OBs, etc., that you want to share, we can put them as examples, of course, anonymized and edited if need be, also for the other users. And of course, please contact us through support.isa.org, even if you just have comments on how things worked well or less well, and what features are missing.
Yeah, similarly, I would like to add, so similarly, I mean, this also holds true for ops prep. So if you are using it and you find something not user-friendly, or if you think, I would really like to have such an option or such a feature, please drop us an email, and we will try to implement things that makes life of your observation preparation easier. So, for example, like the suggestion with the absolute offsets, I mean, which is a comment that we received already, let's say several years ago or 10 years ago, that when there was no ops prep, when users are preparing OBs, they're saying, oh, these relative offsets, they are too complicated. I mean, it's much easier to think in absolute terms, but let's say 2 decades ago, I mean, it was chosen by ISO to define all the offsets in relative offset terms, and and this is why also ops prep has adapted the same definition, because I think it would be much then more confusing for the user to type in the list in ops prep, I mean, the absolute offset values, and then having in the templates, in the actual templates, to type in relative offsets. So, but I fully understand, I mean, that this is, it's a valid comment, of course.
First question from John.
I'm not sure if Monica covered it entirely in the presentation, but a really cool feature of Ops Prep is that if you can use Gaia stars to define your offset reference star, and you just point and click on the Gaia star, and it will then calculate the position of that guide star, taking into account its proper motion, in the middle of the epoch and calculate therefore the position of your target in the middle of the epoch, if it has proper motion as well, and calculate the relative offset you need in order to achieve that observation. So while we do not yet have the possibility to specify our own stars via absolute coordinates, you can use the point and click option to choose a Gaia star and obfuscate the need to actually even put relative or absolute. You can just point and click. And it highlights which stars are suitable choices for you. It's so it takes away perhaps the need, at least in some cases, to know either relative or absolute offsets.
We have a question from Mario asking if there is any plan to save, for example, FIMS files associated with OBs in the ISO archive, such that these files will eventually be retrieved and used in the future.
No, we don't have these plans, and as a matter of fact, the information that is in the FIMS files gets written in the headers. I know it's not at all the same thing to reproduce them, but information in principle is there, and the way that archive has been set up, it's really used to store the results of the observations, not the preparation of the observations. I mean, we do not expose the OBs, and currently there are no plans to do that.
Actually, the information that FIMS produces that you can use to reload, FIMS produces several files, and the one that you can open to reload a previous session is not actually attached to the OBs at all. So it never actually goes anywhere near the databases at the moment. So that information is lost. And the information that actually gets attached to the OBs, it cannot be used at a later date, extracted and then used with FIMS to go back to the setup, unfortunately. If you want to save the setups, you have to save the original files yourself.
So it's 3 p.m., so we're right on time. So if there are no further questions, before leaving, there are just a couple of announcements. The first one is that presentations are available online on the meeting webpage, and also so the presentation in the first part and the other ones will be uploaded soon. And the second announcement is that it's still possible until Friday to register for one-to-one sessions with expert users of the phase 2. So if you have if you want to have a one-to-one session for the preparation, help for the preparation for your P2 phase, you can register you can request one, and you can do that on the meeting website just by registering again and specifying who is the instrument and the RAN ID for which you got time award within P1. And then thank you very much for coming to the third part of the LPO Users Workshop, and thanks to all the speakers today. And we encourage you to start playing with your own P2 data, and so that you are ready next week for the hands-on sessions, which will be on News and Okai on Wednesday, 28th. Thank you very much again, and have a nice day. See you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.